The Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon, published in 1961, stands as a seminal work in post-colonial studies and anti-colonial thought. Fanon, a psychiatrist and revolutionary theorist from Martinique, wrote this powerful text during the decolonization struggles of the mid-20th century. Drawing on his experiences as a psychiatrist in Algeria during the country's war for independence from French colonial rule, Fanon presents a searing analysis of colonialism, its psychological effects, and the path to liberation. The book not only examines colonial systems, but also advocates for revolutionary violence as a means of achieving true freedom and dignity. Divided into 5 sections, Fanon's work continues to resonate with activists, scholars, and thinkers exploring oppression, race, and the consequences of colonial domination. Colonialism and violence. The opening chapter, concerning violence, remains one of the most discussed sections of The Wretched of the Earth. Here, Fanon asserts that violence is an inevitable and necessary response to colonial oppression. Colonialism, according to Fanon, is inherently violent. It dehumanizes the colonized people and maintains control through force. The colonizers divide society into binaries, the colonizer and the colonized, the privileged and the dispossessed. In such a system, violence becomes not only a tool of the oppressors, but also a means for the oppressed to reclaim their humanity. Fanon argues that for colonized individuals, violence represents a form of catharsis. The act of violence allows them to shake off the psychological shackles imposed by the colonizers. Colonized subjects have internalized feelings of inferiority and hopelessness. Thus, violence disrupts this internalized state and reasserts their agency. Fanon's perspective on violence, however controversial, reflects his belief in the revolutionary struggle as a transformative process, one that can destroy colonial structures and create a new, liberated world. Fanon also critiques the tendency of the colonized elite to seek compromise with colonial powers. He argues that these elites, who have been assimilated into the colonial framework through education and privilege, often betray the interests of the broader population. True decolonization, Fanon insists, must involve the masses. It requires an upheaval of the colonial world, not a reform of its existing structures. The psychological impact of colonialism, a key element of The Wretched of the Earth, is Fanon's exploration of the psychological effects of colonialism. As a psychiatrist, he was deeply concerned with how colonial domination affects the mental health of the oppressed. Colonized people live in a state of constant alienation and trauma. They are stripped of their cultural identity, forced to see themselves through the gaze of the colonizer, and denied humanity. Fanon discusses the creation of a colonized mentality, whereby the oppressed internalize the stereotypes and values imposed by the colonizers. This results in self-hatred, as colonized individuals come to see their own traditions, culture, and ways of life as inferior. The psychological damage caused by colonialism is compounded by poverty, violence, and systemic inequality. Fanon's insights in this area draw attention to the fact that decolonization is not just a political or economic process, it is also psychological. In Colonial War and Mental Disorders, Fanon presents case studies from his psychiatric practice that illustrate the devastating mental health consequences of colonial violence. He treats both the oppressed and the oppressors, revealing the ways in which violence dehumanizes both groups. Colonizers, though in positions of power, are also morally and psychologically damaged by their participation in systemic brutality. The role of the peasantry. In contrast to Marxist thought, which often focuses on the urban proletariat as the leading revolutionary class, Fanon places emphasis on the role of the rural peasantry in anti-colonial movements. He argues that the colonized urban elite are too deeply intertwined with colonial power structures and therefore cannot drive true revolutionary change. Instead, Fanon looks to the rural masses, those who are most excluded and marginalized by colonial society, as the driving force for liberation. The countryside becomes the center of resistance, where revolutionary movements can organize and gain strength. Fanon points out that peasants are less corrupted by colonial influence, as they have maintained closer ties to indigenous cultural traditions. Their marginalization under colonial systems makes them ready to embrace radical change. Fanon's focus on the peasantry highlights the importance of inclusivity in the revolutionary struggle, as he insists that the liberation of the colonized must involve all segments of society. Cultural liberation and national consciousness. A significant theme in The Wretched of the Earth is the relationship between culture and liberation. Fanon emphasizes the importance of rediscovering and reclaiming indigenous culture as a means of resisting colonial domination. Under colonial rule, the culture of the oppressed is suppressed and devalued. The colonizer imposes their own values, language, and beliefs, creating a sense of cultural erasure among the colonized. Fanon argues that reclaiming one's culture is a powerful act of resistance. It allows the colonized to reconnect with their history, traditions, and identity. However, he warns against a nostalgic return to a pre-colonial past. Instead, he advocates for a dynamic and forward-looking national consciousness, one that unites the people in the struggle for liberation and in the building of a post-colonial society. This new national consciousness must be inclusive, transcending tribal, ethnic, and regional divisions. Fanon warns against the pitfalls of nationalism when it becomes exclusionary or replicates colonial hierarchies. For him, true liberation involves creating a society based on equality, justice, and solidarity among all formerly colonized people. Let me know if you'd like this reformatted, summarized, or expanded further. The post-colonial challenges. In the later sections of the book, Fanon examines the challenges that arise after independence. He is critical of the post-colonial bourgeoisie, who often seek to replace the colonizers without dismantling the colonial systems of power. Fanon describes how this elite class exploits the masses, perpetuating inequality and stagnating progress. Fanon warns against neocolonialism, where former colonial powers maintain control over newly independent nations through economic domination and political influence. He calls for a rejection of dependency on the former colonizers and advocates for self-reliance and the development of indigenous economic systems. True liberation, Fanon insists, requires a complete restructuring of society, politically, economically, and culturally. Fanon also critiques the rise of authoritarianism in post-colonial states. He warns that if the masses are excluded from political processes, leaders may establish oppressive regimes that mirror the colonial systems they replaced. For Fanon, the revolution must be an ongoing process, one that continues to prioritize the welfare of the people. The Wretched of the Earth had an immediate and profound impact on anti-colonial movements around the world. Its themes resonated with revolutionaries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America who were struggling to dismantle colonial rule. Leaders like Che Guevara and Amilcar Cabral drew inspiration from Fanon's ideas on violence, liberation, and the role of the masses in revolutionary change. Fanon's work also influenced broader intellectual movements, including post-colonial studies, critical race theory, and liberation theology. His analysis of the psychological effects of oppression continues to inform contemporary discussions on identity, trauma, and systemic inequality. Additionally, Fanon's critique of post-colonial governance remains relevant as many nations still grapple with corruption, neocolonialism, and economic dependency. However, Fanon's advocacy of violence has sparked significant debate. Critics argue that his emphasis on revolutionary violence risks legitimizing destructive conflicts. Others contend that Fanon's call for violence must be understood in the context of colonial brutality, where peaceful resistance often met with violent repression. The Wretched of the Earth remains a landmark text in the struggle for justice, freedom, and equality. Frantz Fanon's powerful critique of colonialism, his exploration of its psychological impacts, and his call for revolutionary change continue to inspire movements for liberation around the globe. While some aspects of Fanon's work remain controversial, his insights into oppression, resistance, and the complexities of decolonization provide an enduring framework for understanding the legacies of colonialism and the ongoing fight for human dignity. Let me know if you'd like further edits or formatting.